What if I told you that Africa isn't trying to build a competitor to the US dollar, but is instead laying the groundwork to leave it behind altogether? No big announcements, no front page headlines shouting, "New currency launched." Just something far more disruptive happening quietly right now. It's called the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, or PAPS for short. And it isn't a new coin or token. It's a digital backbone, a code, a functional infrastructure that allows African nations to trade with each other directly, using their own local currencies with no detour through the US dollar, euros, or Western correspondent banks. This is not just a clever workaround, it's a careful, quiet plan for genuine trade independence, and it's already operational. Here's the part that should sting and show why this system matters. To this day, the majority of trade between African countries is still settled in dollars and usually routed through banks in the West. So, when Kenya sells coffee to Egypt, or when Nigeria buys power equipment from Ghana, the money doesn't simply move within Africa. Instead, it flies thousands of miles to New York, sits in a Western bank, then bounces back, with fees, delays, and risk along the way. For decades, this wasteful detour has been normal, but now, for the first time, African nations have the capacity to settle these payments directly and instantly, with no dollar in between, no unnecessary pit stop in foreign financial centers. If you think this is just an African story, look closer. It's the start of a major shift in global economic power, one that international markets will increasingly feel. Picture a South African manufacturer shipping machinery to Rwanda. The payment clears within seconds. The South African exporter gets paid in rand. The Rwandan importer pays in francs. No dollar conversion, no correspondent bank in Europe or America, no anxious waiting for settlement. This is not a plan on paper. PAPS makes it real, one transaction at a time. And here's the catch. Every single transaction that uses PAPSes, instead of the dollar, weakens the dollar's dominance in a subtle but real way. No dramatic collapse, no headline-grabbing collapse of global reserves, just a slow erosion, trade by trade, payment by payment. It's a quiet revolution. For the first time in modern economic history, African nations are gaining the tools to define the value of their own goods and services on their own terms. This fits perfectly into the vision of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. When first announced, the idea sounded bold, maybe even unrealistic. 54 nations, a market of 1.4 billion people, unified into a single zone with zero tariffs on 90% of goods. But what always made this dream feel far-fetched was the absence of a shared financial system to tie it all together. Now that missing piece exists. PAPS is live in multiple countries including Ghana, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe. The AFCFTA isn't just a treaty anymore. It's transforming into a functioning reality, a living network where goods and payments flow without foreign bottlenecks. What many in the West fail to notice is that once you build the pipes, you no longer need to ask permission to turn on the tap. Africa is far more than a market. It's the source of vast global resources, rare earth minerals, oil, natural gas, and metals that power everything from smartphones to green energy. Historically, these resources have mostly been traded in our dollars, with pricing power controlled far from the continent. Now, with a payment system like PAPS and with the African Export-Import Bank supporting local currency deals, Africa is gradually gaining leverage to set prices closer to home using its own financial channels. Consider what that really means. Imagine cobalt mined in the Congo, gas extracted in Mozambique, or gold exported from Ghana, all changing hands without the dollar ever being involved. Quietly, the global trade order begins to adjust, starting at the supply side. For decades, SWIFT has been the central nervous system of global banking, tightly linked with Western financial influence. If SWIFT says no, your money doesn't move. Period. But now, Africa has its own clearing system, independent and supported by African banks. It doesn't need approval from Washington or Brussels to operate. PAPS might not yet be a full SWIFT replacement, but it works, it's growing, and it's increasingly woven into the trade flows of major West African economies. This creates a quiet but serious shift. African countries now have an internal path to settle payments even under external economic stress. No crisis or sanctions can freeze it out completely. It's not a public spectacle. It's a realignment happening underneath the surface. Few Western policymakers have grasped how real and irreversible this shift may become. The geopolitical angle is equally revealing. Although PAPSS was designed by Africans for Africa, other global players see its potential. China, Africa's largest trade partner, is deepening its trade in yuan instead of dollars. The more robust PAPFACE and the CFTA become, the easier it is for China to settle its vast African trade outside the US-dominated SWIFT system. It's not a dramatic switch. It's a subtle reorientation that chips away at dollar primacy step by step. A common misconception is that groupings like BRICS are racing to create a single digital currency to overthrow the dollar. But insiders, including central bank officials, emphasize that the true focus is on building payment infrastructure. Systems like PAPS, BRICS Pay, cross-border central bank digital currencies, local currency energy deals, and regional trade. Networks. The new strategy isn't about replacing the dollar with a coin. It's about making the dollar optional by making alternatives frictionless and reliable. In this sense, Africa is becoming a live testbed for a larger global experiment, proving that you don't need to wait for a shiny new global coin to shift economic power. You just need dependable pipes and then let trade flow through them. No one seriously expects the dollar to vanish overnight. But every time Kenya buys fertilizer from Egypt using Kenyan shillings and Egyptian pounds instead of dollars, or every time Ghana settles a cocoa export in local currencies, that's one less dollar-denominated deal. Each of these small, invisible steps reduces the reason to hold large US dollar reserves and chips away at the dollar's special status. PAPS is not flashy. It's bureaucratic, procedural, and mostly invisible to the public, which is precisely why it works so well. When infrastructure changes, behavior follows naturally. By the time it becomes impossible to ignore, the transformation's already well underway. The next African Union economic summits don't look like they did years ago. Gone is the over-reliance on foreign loans and donor conferences. Now the conversation is about how to scale self-reliance, how to link dozens of currencies into a unified trade web, how to keep more value circulating within Africa instead of leaking abroad. PAPSS is the platform that makes this vision practical. From this base, the continent can explore innovations like digital currencies, coordinated monetary policies, and maybe even regional clearing units that further reduce reliance on foreign financial centers. The message running through all of this is simple but powerful. This is about economic sovereignty. And that idea alone causes quite ripples through the world's established power structures. Once Africa can efficiently trade with itself, its negotiating position with everyone else improves dramatically. For decades, the US approach to global financial influence has been to manage crises as they happen. But it has not focused on quietly preventing alternatives from taking root. PAPS is not the crisis they prepared for. It's the gradual rerouting they underestimated. No fireworks, no sudden de-dollarization shock, just a steady flow of payments moving through new channels, accumulating into a powerful shift. By the time policymakers in Washington or Brussels grasp the scale of this, the conversation may no longer be about how to stop it, but how to catch up in a world that has already changed course. So step back for a moment. Yes, PAPS is about enabling African trade to flow more freely and cheaply, but its ripple effect reaches far beyond Africa's borders. It shows that power does not have to announce itself loudly to be real. Sometimes it moves through codes, networks, and agreements that quietly, methodically rewrite the rules of who controls value and who decides the price of the future.